Hello everybody and welcome to Organian's Puzzle Box. In today's tutorial, I want to talk about the procedural vegetation system introduced in Unreal Engine 5.7. Now, a lot of people may have seen the live stream with the Witcher demo and all that sort of stuff, which obviously showcased what this is all about, but they didn't quite show how to use it. So in today's video, we're going to actually enable this plugin in Unreal Engine 5.7. We're going to actually look at all the options of how to control these trees, how to create new trees, how to actually take this system and use it in your own scene, what performance kind of looks like as well. We're talking about the new wind system, some of the quirks with it, and as I said, basically a full introduction of how to use this system effectively for your own projects. Now, bear in mind, this is an experimental feature, so don't expect it to be completely fleshed out. You know, there are issues like, for example, the wind blueprint bugging out and then your foliage doesn't react to wind anymore. But there's some caveats there to resolve, and I'm sure that by the time 5.7 fully releases, they would have resolved all these issues. So again, big pointer there. It is an experimental feature that you should be aware of. Now, we are going to use these trees in my WorldForge project, which is something that's available on Fab if you're interested in building very nice detailed landscapes using nanite displacement and foliage and so on. A very powerful tool. But we don't need the WorldForge to use this foliage, but if you'd like to support the channel, please have a look. So we're just gonna jump straight into it. I'm gonna show you step by step what you need to do, all the options, and by the end of this video, you should be capable of creating a forest quite easily using this new system. So I've opened my WorldForge map and I've got foliage in it, which I really like, and I would like to add trees in here. And we're going to use the new Unreal Engine 5.7 procedural tree system to achieve just that. The first thing you want to do is you want to go over here and go to plugins and then search for foliage. So when you type in foliage like that, it will come in as dynamic wind or something like that. So you've got to know what basically to type in. So if you go for procedural, you'll see in here it says Procedural Vegetation Editor. This is the thing that you want to enable. So when you do that, it will say that this is an experimental feature, blah, blah, blah. Just press yes, and it will ask you to restart the engine. But before you do this, because you don't want to restart the engine twice, you also want to go over into Edit, Project Settings, and then in here, you want to type in Nanite like that, and then you'll see in here Nanite Foliage. So Nanite obviously should be enabled, and then Nanite Foliage Experimental, we're going to enable that as well. And now we can restart the engine. Once you load up the project again, there's nothing really different in the project and at the minute that you can't see. But if you do right click, you will be able to see this foliage tab over here, and you do have procedural vegetation to click on, which is a brand new thing that has now showed up. But I don't want you to use that just yet. Let's actually look at the asset zoo that comes with the plugin. So for you to actually access the asset zoo, you want in the content folder to go over here to the settings. And actually, I'm not sure if you can see that because of the window. So let me just open a content browser window right here. What you want to do is go over to this, gear icon here and enable engine content and plugin content so you can actually see the plugin itself. Now, once you do that, you'll be able to go over here into all. So you see you're currently in the content folder where you can see whatever you got on your project. You want to go to the all folder, then go to engine, go to plugins, and then in here you'll have vegetation somewhere lost in this vast sea of various different folders. So the best thing for you to do is actually just type in vegetation, and then you'll see all this vegetation showing up. So this is what you're looking for, really. So if you right click it, you'll be able to show in folder view. And now it will take you over to the folder where this vegetation exists. So you can go over to the Procedural Vegetation Editor content. You want to go into Sample Assets, and then into Maps, you have the Asset Zoo. So if you double click that, it will open the new level, which contains all these trees. So let me just have a look at the map. So in here, you will not see the map in this particular way. The only reason why you're seeing it like this on my level is because I've modified it slightly. In reality, you will most likely see it, you'll see the landscape being very flat. So for example, here where I've got the landscape edited like this. And by the way, if you edit anything into the asset zoom app, whenever you load the plugin in a new project, it will always be changed, right? So I'm just currently just, like I'm just erasing what I've done here, or I could just go over into manage and have a look at the layers and just, well, actually I cannot delete that layer, unfortunately, because it is the main layer. Anyway, I've now flattened this entire landscape. And then if I select this PCG here, which is this big box, in actuality, it's probably looking something like this for you, maybe like this, right? And you will most likely also see wind working here, right? So these trees are blowing in the wind, but then these for me are not, but they might be blowing in the wind for you. And this is because on this new procedural system that they've added, the wind blueprint is kind of broken. So this is the wind blueprint right here. If you click it, it allows you to, you've guessed it, play around with the wind intensity, change the map that it's using to generate the wind patterns, and also you can change the seasonal strength of the leaves, and also you can decide the health of the leaves as well on these trees. But as I said, the wind, for example, this dynamic wind, is no longer affecting these trees, and that's mainly because I've kind of modified them in the sense of I've scaled up the level, the PCG that's displaying them, and I've also moved them around, and that can bug it. Now I am going to look for a solution. If I do find it, I'll put it in the comment section below, or if you know the solution, let me know. But as of right now, even opening the blueprint and editing it doesn't seem to allow these trees to kind of work again, unfortunately. So I will, as I said, I will effectively try and fix this. But one thing that I have tried here was to basically just delete this completely, and then just open the graph again and add it back in, and then click generate. And as you'll notice, it's still not allowing the wind to actually work, which is a bit unfortunate, to be honest, but it is what it is. Anyway, let's move on to see just how this system functions. Now, first of all, let's just say you want to populate the entire world with these trees. So we're going to use these here in the middle because they're the ones that the wind is also working on. And, obviously we can modify any of these setups. I'm going to show you how the setups work internally in a bit. But for now, let's just see what we can use with what's been predefined, because you obviously can copy this setup into your own project wherever you want and just use it there. But this landscape here, I'm also going to sculpt back in sort of like these peaks here, because I think this is going to be very important for us to see how it all functions. By default, the PCG will automatically spread the trees everywhere where the volume is available. So I've just pressed G on the keyboard to see the volume, the PCG volume. So that's the bounding box for it. So you can see that's how tall it is. So if it's actually, you've got the scale of it here. If we actually increase this, let's say to 50, then it will generate trees across this side at a value of 50. And then if we put this to 50 as well, then it will add trees in every direction as well. Also, I'm going to make sure that over here I have a screen percentage set to 100%. Sorry, let me just do that again. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want the maximum quality in the viewport. And also looking at scalability, it's set to cinematic. Okay, so right now I've got these trees that have been defined. And as you can see, they've also kind of climbed up this hill. But let's say if I go to 100, you'll notice that it doesn't climb up all the way to the, all the sides of the hill. So let me just do that to 100. You'll see that it's kind of not going up to that tall point. So this is where doing this particular measurement, 50 there as well, it allows these trees to go up like that, which is very, very nice, because now you obviously can populate, I can go to like 200 by 200. So now I've got trees spawning on the entire landscape. And if we put this to 500, by the way, by 500, you'll notice that even though the bounding box, this volume for the PCG is going well beyond the landscape, it's not currently spawning anywhere where the landscape doesn't exist. And that's fine, because it's sampling automatically any surface to spawn on. So this means that it will spawn on static meshes as well, not just the landscape. But we could make it only spawn on the landscape if you want. I will show you later how to do that. But there is another problem with these trees now, because you're seeing here, I mean, trees don't usually grow at that angle necessarily. They kind of try to go up, right? And this is another thing that we can modify. So again, we can edit the PCG. So I'll just double click the PCG graph in there, and I'm going to put it over like that. And what you'll notice here is you got a set of nodes. So you access this by just double clicking the wind example PCG, okay? And let me just see if I can position this in such a way that we can see the graph. Okay, so this is what decides where the trees are spawning. So this is basically using the ray hit query in the world, and if the ray is hitting any surface, that's where trees can spawn. So what this means is that if I go over here and add a cube shape like that, and I'll make this cube quite big, 50 by 50, something like that, okay? And I'm gonna put it probably, maybe around here like that, okay? Now you see that the PCG is not spawning on it, but if we select it and then we say generate, if you say clean up and generate, you'll notice that it now has indeed spawned on top of this mesh. But by doing this process of clean up and generate, you see that the wind is now stopped working. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to select the PCG again and do actually, you see that? I've just kind of like lost the wind there. So we do need sort of a solution for this. And the only way to really bring that back, it's clearly something to do with this system here of generating, and you know what I mean? So in order for us to try and bring that back, we can go over here into these settings and so on. It's not going to do much. Like, I haven't found anything in here that's going to allow me to make sure that these volumes just kind of like, regain their wind value. So I've gone through everything in here. So again, if you know for a solution, just let me know. But what I generally just do, if I want to reset this and make sure that the wind is working, I'll just reopen the map. So if I do that, then, so if I do that and don't save, now you'll see that I'm back to the map that I used to have. But then the wind is working again on those particular parameters. So you can see here, the wind is now working on these again. So anyway, I'm just going to scale these again to 500 by 500 just to have them everywhere. And I'm going to put this to like 100, so it's very tall. And like I've said to you, these trees are growing in all sorts of random directions, okay? And when we look at the PCG nodes, if you want this to, grow upward, then we have this transform points that we're going to play with. You can also in here look for landscape, where it says get landscape data. And if you unplug this and instead plug this in, right, then the PCG, which now no longer has the wind working, so I'm not going to like reset this again. The wind is no longer working, guys. We'll have to find a solution to get it to this. But now that I've unplugged it and I've only put it to get landscape data, this means that the trees will only spawn on any landscape asset type that's engulfed within this volume, but it will not spawn on any static mesh anymore. So it'll only be landscape based. But we're going to put that back to what it was, so it's like able to spawn everywhere. And we're going to look at these transform points because I want to modify these trees now so that they actually kind of go upwards. So the rotation on the z-axis, which is this one, it's fine to like split, rotate around quite nicely. But when you get for the X and Y, you can see that they're already set to 0, but they're still rotating oddly. So you want to put absolute rotation here, which is fine. That's going to make it work. They're going to go up. You might want to add a min and max here, so -5 to 5 or something like that, which is going to, in my opinion, sell that effect of trees. But again, you lean these trees as much as you need. Obviously, you can always kind of go larger, so sorry, not 5, you could go like 15 or something like that, so the trees are going to lean a bit more. And again, this one could be 15, so now you're getting a bit more a better looking output. Now when you look at the base of these trees, they can be floating onto your landscape, so with that you want to do the offset minimum, so you might want to put that to -15 or -20 or 50 or something like that. So Again, it's just based on trying to bury these trees a little bit into the ground just to make them actually fit in with the landscape a bit better. Obviously, there's a lot of other, scales and uniform scale and so on. You want to play around with all these settings as much as possible, because this is ultimately going to allow you to control how these trees look like once they've been generated. Okay, then you have a density. So this one is going to allow us, if we decrease the lower bound, you'll see that we get this amount of trees, and if we increase it, then you will just wipe out the amount of trees. So this is like a filter. So if you want a lot of trees, just put this to 0, and the upper bound you want to keep that to 1, because if you put it down to 0 again, you're not gonna get any more trees showing up. Now these are preset, these numbers here, but that doesn't mean that you can't like expose these and further refine them, right? Anyway, what I wanted to say is that if we go over to the self-pruning here, you can actually increase this number to like prune some of these trees, but I wouldn't like change it. Again, you might want to keep it this way, but you can change the parameters so it's pruning the small to large, or all equal, for example. It's really, like if you do a none, it's not pruning anything, so now you're getting a high density of trees. It's basically just generating a lot of trees into this volume, so I'm going to keep it that way for now. And then going further in here is, this is the final output here. If there's anything else, I do reckon that the wind is related to this entire PCG here to make it work, but I have yet to find exactly what's causing it. So we'll get there in a bit anyway. But now it's time to move on to edit the actual trees themselves as well, which is, this is just a PCG system that... So now to edit and make our own trees, we can go over here and, we can actually create a new samples, or we can have a look at the ones that are already created. So generally, this is going to be one of them. So if you actually double click it, and I'll bring this over here, you'll be able to see that this is the setup for the hazel bush, right? And it's generating 4 of them. So that's why you can see 4 in here with the nodes. But what we'll do is we'll create a brand new one based on the template provided. So I'm going to go over into my normal folder, into the content. So let me just go in the content folder, the World Forge. I'm going to make a tree over here. So I'm going to right click and have a look for foliage and select procedural vegetation. And then it's going to ask me to select one type from these 4. Obviously, I can create my own brand new one if I wanted to, but I can actually use these as a template. So for example, I will take this Norway, well, actually I'll take the European beach. I am then going to click create, and I'm going to call this, I don't know, we'll go for PVE beach, and then test 01. I'm going to double click it, and now we have it over here in our panel. So let me just drag it in. Okay, this is our foliage. So I don't want to generate 4 trees at a time, so I am just going to take all these off and just leave the top one. When you select one node, like this one, it will now show you the skeleton of this tree. And this is quite useful because at this point you can actually have a look, and you might want to carve some of these. So if you increase this number, you'll see that we're carving from the top and all the way to the bottom. So if you keep going, you'll basically carve the whole tree off. Now bear in mind that this does actually can leave an open tube at the top. So usually if you don't carve anything, then you'll get a full-size tree. You can also change from length from root or from bottom. So for example, if you do it that way, you're basically cutting off the tree from the bottom, which allows you to make a tree that grows its branches very close to the soil. You can also have a look at the Z position, which again just kind of functions in the same way as the length from root. And then you can have one for radius, which just kind of leaves the tree as big as you want it to be, but it's also just shortening the branches effectively. Now here's the nice thing here. You can actually copy paste this node and just connect it like that, and now you have 2 carves, which is great. But then one of them is a radius one, so maybe you want to take some of these branches off, and the second one is actually one that's taken from the bottom, so you might want to shorten the tree. So you see what I mean? Just already we've just created a new template for our tree, and I might decrease this radius a bit more, something like that. So then the next one is a gravity slider. So in here we can actually go for gravity, the gravity pool, So in what direction is the gravity pulling our tree? So right now it's pulling it down, right, onto this axis, but you can then play around with these axes as well to just kind of decide. Now again, gravity will always pull it down, obviously, and this allows you to kind of change its angles as well. So you can have a tree that looks very wild, but at the same time, you can also increase this number to just kind of say, you know what, I want everything to kind of point upwards, right? So the gravity is kind of being inverted. So -1 just means the default gravity. And right now, as you can see, I'm doing some really crazy stuff here with this tree. Okay, that's what that looks like. Now, it is a bit too bent, so I might just try and, bring it a bit back into shape. Maybe something like that. Okay, so our tree is a bit, falling down to the left side like that. Then we can have a look at the scale, which, as it implies, it just changes the scale of the tree, makes it very large or very small. So we'll just leave it to, well, actually, we'll leave it to 2. By the way, going back to gravity, we can change from gravity to phototropic, and this gives you a different kind of approach. So, for example, now you're just basically creating these very swirly looking branches and so on. And again, you can angle correct, but you don't have any direction for this. You can then use the phototropic bias to just create some really, really odd looking trees, I must say. Now, obviously, as I said, the scale, just make sure that it's, the tree just goes very tall. I'm just going to do that 1.3 actually. And then we have the mesh builder. So now the tree just kind of loads up the material based on, it's loading up the material, but you got in here material settings. So if you want to actually change the material itself for everything, you can do that. So right now it's loading the European beech bark 1, and then it's got bark 1, I think, in every slot. But you could obviously have custom materials in here. So right now it's just using the same MI, but there's no reason why you can't just keep putting this on. And obviously you got multiple methods of how these trees, how these trees are kind of like being spawned onto the branches and so on. So you could do it by generation, you can do it by age, and then you can do it by radius. And the radius one is a bit odd. I'm not entirely sure how it's loading up some of this stuff, by the way. So these are things that we're going to have to explore in the future. We're just going to leave it to the default generation there. So those are the materials. Obviously, you can add your own materials. You can edit these materials. You can change the, if it's going to be a repeat. So right now it's set to fit, but you can set it to repeat. Obviously, you would want to have a tiling texture to add onto this tree. And then you have, after the materials, you have the settings for the mesh. So you might want, with this mesh here, you might want to, for example, add more divisions. So if you have less divisions, then the tree is going to look a lot, it's going to be more performant, but it's also going to look a lot more blocky. With more divisions, you're going to get far more resolution. You can also increase the minimum division to make sure that you got smoother geometry everywhere. But generally, I find that keep it to 1632 is fine. We have a lot of other sliders in here that allows you to like shortest segments allowed, like how short these these bends are onto the branches. So generally you want to you want to keep this at 0 to have these curves that are quite natural. But again, you've got a lot of settings in here, so you can do between a longest segment allowed, how long it is, and then the short one. And then you can kind of make trees that look a bit more gamified, as opposed to the ones made, for more cinematics. But if you do actually go from lit to a wireframe, you can actually kind of see the wireframe live. So if we actually decrease the longest lengths here and the shortest, you'll notice we're getting a lot more geometry onto these branches as well. So I would try to do that. Now you have a segment retention impact here. So I think this only works if you're actually using these settings. I'm just kind of obviously just pushing all of them in multiple directions without any thought or reason right now, because again, I haven't yet fully explored this to the to its full extent for me to be able to fully grasp how much more changes we can make. Now, obviously, all of these branches end up with an open cap. I think they're probably going to fix that in the future, but right now when we add the like leaves and other smaller branches, it automatically fixes that. If you keep going down, you'll have other things in here like displacement, adding a displacement texture to this tree to make it more, well, you guessed it, displaced. Then we go to the bone reduction, and what this does is it's in conjunction with the wind system. So the more bones you have, the more the tree will realistically bend around based on your wind, but this is also going to take more performance. So you might want to increase this number to reduce the number of bones, but now, as you can see, there's only one bone for this branch as opposed to what it was before when it had like two. So it had one here and one here. Obviously, you can keep going lower and lower and have more bones to allow for these branches to move more. Now, if your tree is quite large, thick, and so on, it's obviously going to be a lot stiffer, so you don't need as many bones. I think they're going to probably improve on this system to effectively add more bone manipulation, like, for example, having sturdier bones at the base and more bones onto the smaller branches. Now you're going to have a foliage palette here, and if you go over here into the foliage meshes, this is where you can basically add as many different variations. Right now it's just using two variations of generating all these leaves and branches, and you can press the add button and just keep adding new meshes. Bear in mind that if you open the mesh, you do want your pivot point to be right here. So the pivot point should be at the point where you want the branch to kind of attach itself to the tree. So, you know, this is basic modeling 101, as they say. Right. And then we will go to the, by the way, you can add anything here. Like, it doesn't have to be a branch. Let me just show you what I mean. If we select this and we say, you know what, I want a leaf. Okay. We can add a leaf there. See that? Now there's massive leaves. This is how you build plants right now, not just trees. But again, we're just showing trees for now. Then we have the foliage distribution, and obviously this kind of tells you where's the foliage going to spawn. So for example, this ethylene threshold just kind of kills off the foliage from below all the way to the top as you increase it. You also can override this distribution, which then means that the foliage will spawn in different patterns. And again, I'm not going to pretend that I know what all of these settings will do right now, but you can kind of see here just what sort of results you can get by doing this. Like, I can imagine doing a fern this way. You know, you'd use override distribution and then do something like this, and every one of these would be like the fern leaf, and the leaves would be bigger in the center, smaller at the start, smaller at the top, and at the end, and we'll have like a tip. But then everything else will be smaller. So yeah, this is literally a fern builder right here. Obviously, you can play around with the instance spacing ramp, and then you do have a ramp in here, which I didn't really find that it's actually adding it's changing anything when you play around with the ramp. I might be wrong on this, but the ramp doesn't seem to yet function. Instead, you can have instance spacing, and you can have this instance spacing ramp effect. Again, changing this, but then changing the ramp doesn't really seem to do much. So I don't think this is fully working yet, or maybe I've just not worked out how to do that. Now we can do -1 here. We can do 1, 5. I think 5 is probably, well, actually I think about 10 is probably the max, but I don't think you'd want to make a tree that looks like this. So -1 just is the default value here. Then we have scale. So we obviously can increase the scale of what we're, let me just disable override distribution, by the way. So we can, oh, sorry, if you disable it, you can't do scale either. So you must have override distribution. So I'm just going to try and make the tree look as natural as possible. But we do have the scale slider here, and then we have branch scale impact. This is just going to decide how big these branches are that are being spawned. We do have a min and max scale. One thing that I don't like as of right now is that these numbers are hard coded, and the only real way for you to change this is if you edit the actual the nodes themselves, because they already have like a preset parameter done to them. Now you do have random scale minimum and random scale maximum, so you could do like a maybe like a 2 there. So you can see these are now very large and very small as well, but it's a bit of an odd one how they kind of show up, right? It is definitely odd. Some of these settings are not working as intended, I don't think. You can see there that it's just kind of bugs out if you play around with random scale. I don't know why. And then after scale, we've got vector settings. Like, for example, you can change the axis of these foliages. I've not really seen this, working as much as you might think, or at least not in the way that it's intended. So I wouldn't really play around with these until I think the full release and we get a bit more options in here. And then you have this philotexy, which again, I have tested this out and doesn't really seem to be doing anything at the minute. But you can change some of this stuff to alternate between how the branches are being sort of like spawned. So you want them opposite to each other or alternative. So you have one here and then one above and one above, but nothing in between. So there's a lot of different settings like that to just make your tree, like for example, right now it's kind of like bulking into at the ends there. So it could be an interesting thing. Again, you want to experiment with this as much as possible and create your tree. But let's just say this is our tree, or maybe we can disable and this is our tree. And maybe I can have a look at, I don't know, adding some, adding some branches. So I might, add a few more branches here. Oh, actually, sorry, this is removing it. So yeah, maybe something like that. Gonna go back to foliage distribution here. I don't really like that, I don't have a lot of foliage onto this tree. So doing this override here is making more sense to me. But I would like to have a bit more foliage on it. It's fine. It doesn't really matter. End of the day, we want to export this. So if we click onto this exporter, this output, we can select what it's exporting to. So we can actually go in here and just select our, we're just going to go into our content. So I want to go into content, world force. I want to do it here. And I want to export it as skeletal mesh. So it's actually being affected by things like wind. We are going to use voxelize for the foliage itself to maintain good performance. And then we can just press the export button and it's going to ask us which one we want to do. Now, obviously we want the first one, which is a bit odd that it doesn't know that. But anyway, we are going to select beach 1 and press export. This might take a bit of time depending on how many trees you're exporting and how complicated they are. But in general, it's going to be at most a couple of minutes. And once that's done, the tree is ready for you to drop in the world or drop it as another asset in the, in that PCG preset that already comes with this new plugin. And you can just drop it anywhere in the world. So I'm going to drop that into the World Forge. And here we have it, our own tree. So we can actually just drop it into the level. And this is the tree that we created. It's a bit of an odd tree. I must, I must admit. Anyway, when we select, what I want to do is I want to copy, I want to copy that PCG, this one here. So I'm just going to do a window content 1. So we have one content folder, and then I want to get a second one here. This is something that, is quite useful. So over here in the World Forge, I do want to bring the PCG itself. So this one, I'm just going to, as I said, I'm going to drop it here and I'm going to copy. Okay. And that now we have our own. We don't have to, change the one in the plugin. And now I want to open the World Forge very quickly. So I'm going to go over to maps and open that map that I was using earlier. So this will allow me to just drop the this PCG system in here, and I can also use my own tree. So I'm going to put this into the level. Hopefully this will just work. Okay, so it's sampling. As I said, it is already sampling this. Okay, the trees are in the level as they should. Wind, as I said, is not working on them, but that's fine. We are now going to be going to, like, I don't know, 500 by 500. Okay, so that's a lot of trees. That's a forest right there. You can also see that it's not doing it over here because it's kind of hitting a limit, the box. So we do want to put that to maybe like 200, like that. And now we get the trees everywhere. It's not yet encompassing the full map. So, just going to do 1,000 here. That's fine. I don't, I'm not stressing. These trees, I must say, performance isn't that bad. I mean, again, it's not incredible, but it's not too bad of a performance either. Like it's definitely very useful. This foliage is more expensive because it's using WPO right now for its wind, right? But these trees, because everything is voxelized in the background, it's actually not too bad. And you can kind of see just how quickly we did actually put together all of these trees in the level. So what I want to do now is I want to edit. Well, I want to add this tree to it. So here's the thing: you can either edit this, or you can go in here and have a look at the trees, right? And we can pretty much change one of them. So now we've added our own tree, and it's a funky looking tree. This is a funky looking tree, I must say. Yeah, it's not bad actually. It's, you know what, for an experimental feature that just launched, I was able to create a very funky looking, very hard tree. Just gonna make sure, my screen percentage is 69. I'm gonna 69 is a nice number, isn't it? Anyway, put that to 100. Okay. So performance is definitely, I am going to have a look and just kind of see. Right now I am using, everything is on cinematic, so I'm just going to show the FPS. So right now it's, 35 ms. So if I go up into the air here, we'll see that the ms is taking a hit. And this is primarily, I'm spawning a lot of particles with the foliage underneath the trees. So if we actually hide the trees right now, I am getting an error because I'm just spawning too much foliage, it seems. So I can decrease that amount of foliage that I'm spawning. So let me just do that, because again, I think, as I reckon, I'm just doing way too much foliage into the landscape right now because I wanted to make it look nice. So I'm gonna open this, and yeah, I've got 1,000 here, so I'm gonna do like 300. Maybe I'm gonna do this to 200. It's a lot of grass that I'm spawning. Do this as 400. So let's have a look now. So now the sorry, the system seems to no longer be bugging out, the nanite foliage thing. So you can see, looking from up here, we're still kind of hitting a cap of nanite particles being spawned with this foliage. There's a lot of foliage, and we're also up in the air. So predominantly for gameplay reasons, you wouldn't be this close to this high up to see as much nanite foliage. But I'm going to bring back the PCG here, and you'll notice nothing really changed here. Now, you might be thinking, well, actually, the PCG is always loaded, so we could just delete it, and as you can see, nothing changes. So bringing in the trees doesn't affect the performance much at all, right? Now I'm going to drop in here and press play. So we're now playing around. Obviously, there's no, there are no collisions enabled for these trees, just so you know. So you will have to add collisions to your trees. But that's one caveat for you to account for. Some of the performance gain is probably around that as well. The fact that there's no, there are no collisions. Time to fall in the level. There we go. I'm down onto the bottom here, and yeah, I think the performance is pretty good. I mean, right now, I'm using play mode, moving around the scene. It's not bad. One thing that I've noticed with Unreal Engine 5.7 is that the moment you start displaying stats, for some reason, you are going to get some performance reduction for some reason, which is very odd. Not seen that before on, I can go in here and, just say, I want to see FPS. See what I mean? Is just kind of like bumps around. Generally, performance can suffer if you're on cinematic settings. So earlier I was on cinematic settings, and now I am on epic settings and also high settings. It's not too bad, but I think it's predominantly looking really good. Like this is not bad. This is actually very, this is a very good fast forest that we just created here and added in. And I don't necessarily think that you can't improve on it. There's a lot of improvements to be done. The textures can be better. You can use displacement on the trees, and you can have roots on the trees. I mean, nothing's really stopping you here from fully leveraging the power of nanite further and just adding collisions to all these trees and just basically making a playable level very, very quickly. And here we have a first-person sort of perspective onto the trees were generated with a new foliage system. and I'm just moving through the World Forge scene here on the, the World Forge landscape that you can get on Fab, and just added all these trees in with all this foliage that already comes with the World Forge. But very quick, very nice to iterate. I think very performant as well. This is definitely at a very steady playable frame rate. I mean, I'm getting roughly 65 frames right now, which is quite good considering that this is a nanite landscape with displacement on. We've got a lot of foliage, a lot of trees everywhere, and we've got water puddles and all sorts of systems as well. So yeah, I mean, again, it's not something that cannot be optimized further. There's a lot of optimization to be done, but I think overall you're going to agree that it's not looking bad at all. And that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I was really happy to try these tools. I am going to refine my, the way that I work with it. I'm going to try to bring in some new foliage from, something like Houdini and things like that. But effectively, it's all about how you import these assets at the minute, because there's no direct way to bring these meshes as nanite assemblies, straight within Unreal Engine quite easily, and for the system to recognize them as foliage. So there is a bit of intricacy there. But again, by the time Unreal Engine 5.7 fully releases and this procedural system comes out of the experimental phase, I'm sure they would have worked all of this out for us to be able to have a better user experience. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like, comment, and subscribe. Check out my Patreon if you're interested in over 60 projects now available on it for you to access and build your own worlds, be it space scenes, environments, all sorts of things. So yeah, take a look at that if you'd like. A shout out to all my Patreons. Really love you guys. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Keep creating.